Rising Waters and Quasi-portraits, an exhibition by George Johanson. I'd like to start by talking about these three paintings. The show is called Rising Waters and Quasi-portraits. And it's kind of a funny title in a way, but the rising water refers to paintings that I've been doing for a long time on people with floating devices and inner tubes and kayaks. What interests me about it is the combination of these shapes of what they do with the figure. So the figure and kayak, or the figure and inner tubes, become often one unit. It also, the theme interests me because it refers also, in my mind, to global warming, and the inner tubes and the various floating devices suggest, I think, some kind of life-saving devices. I wanted to read a little quote that I ran across of W.H. Auden. He says, "Language is the mother, not the handmaiden of thought. Words will tell you things you never thought or felt before." And I thought that was so beautiful. And I think that applies so much to painting, in that in order to make a statement in painting, the artist, or at least myself, I'm always laying down shapes and improvising and finding the statement within the forms of the painting. So I wanted to talk about this one a little bit. The painting was started several years ago, and I was working with the idea of these floaters here, perhaps in a kind of panic, running across the ground, escaping something enormous in the sky. And when I began to get the idea of what these stencils could do, then I started introducing it into a painting like this, and this eventually became a painting that I call the dance of the debris. And so in this case, the shapes are meant to be like floating debris of some kind, although I'm playing with the idea that they're still abstractions. They're not specific tin cans or such, but perhaps they're readable as inventions that are like debris. But I really get very interested in the difference between the painterly quality of the brush and the sharpness of these stenciled shapes. So let's move. Then I wanted to refer to the painting that's directly across from me, which is called The Lifeguard. And he has invented flotation devices, 6 or 7 of them up on his platform. And it's as if he's kind of perhaps offering them as something that will save you. But they're playful and maybe a bit ominous, and those are all qualities that I like to work with and hint at in the painting. So my exhibition is called Rising Waters, that's part of it, and then Quasi-portraits. And Quasi-portraits is sort of a funny name that I invented because it means a sort of would-be portrait. And many of my paintings are kind of based on specific figures, but they're sort of halfway to be portraits. I don't really They're not meant to be totally that. So this painting is called Two on a Bench, and it was started from a photograph I did of Catherine Nace and Hank Pander, who were sitting on a bench. We were waiting for something at the museum, and so here again I got started with just brushed painting, and then began introducing stenciled shapes into it. So these, if you see the actual painting, you're more aware of it. But these are built up almost an eighth of an inch in places, and it gives a certain play to the space that I think is quite different than if it's all about the same depth of physical depth of paint. So some of these are built up with cardboard shapes that are then filled with paint, and of course the cardboard is removed. But they have a kind of interesting function with the rest of the space, in that parts of it are really physical and other parts are illusionistic. This is based on some photographs I made of Connie Keener, who's a ceramic artist, shows at Russo Gallery, and she has a magnificent garden, and also she's working on a commission of the Virgin Mary for a church. So this is a kind of tongue-in-cheek play on that a bit. It's called the Miracle and the Garden. This is a reference to the garden and maybe a door into the garden, into the flowers and so on. And then this side has a pot with a halo over it, which is kind of as I say, a tongue-in-cheek reference to the mural that she's working on. I gave her 4 arms because she's a very lively person, and she needs to represent her activity and her liveliness. This is a portrait commission from Kim Osgood, who herself is a painter. I've done this from some photographs I took in her studio, but then it's much of it is really invented. So she was sitting on a stool for the photographs, and then and she has this magnificent wood-burning stove in the studio. Other elements, there's this series of lights set up at one point, and then there are renditions of her paintings. She paints birds and mountains a lot, and is a mountain climber herself. And I took the birds out of this painting she's working on and presented them as flying toward the painting in my presentation here. This is an ice axe, and this is her climbing rope. The figure is, instead of being just centralized in the portrait, is way over to one side, and I think it has all of her characteristics, but again, it's not slavishly worked on in terms of if you look at the painting, the head is very simply rendered. This red that appears as the darker part of her skin was the overall ground color here, and actually comes through in many places. And then the light and the darker part were added to that, but not fussed over at all. So they become, I think, more easily a part of the whole abstraction of the painting. So I wanted to say a couple of things about the these dog paintings. They were both started a number of years ago, but they were worked on a lot just this past year and revised. I love the format. I've worked on paintings with this long, thin format over the years a number of times. And one of the things I like about it is the challenge of trying to organize a space that's so long and thin. And of course, you can't just put something right in the middle of it. You've got to sort of come in from the sides, and you've got to be very conscious of how the very bottom of it relates to the top. And I'm trying to suggest that there's space, there's a world beyond just this narrow slit. So it's very much of a compositional challenge. Also, the dogs really fit into the idea of quasi-portraits. And I think of, I've painted dogs quite a bit, and I tend to think of them as stand-ins for personalities, not necessarily specific people that I know, but I think that's the thing that interests me about it. I also, of course, do cats, but dogs have such a range of size and hair and all kinds of things that make it possible to sort of suggest personality. And the last painting I wanted to talk about is this one, which is called The Artist Studio. And of course, it's my studio. It's also pretty literally a showing of what's there. Every item is as it is in place in the studio. It's also a kind of illustration of what W.H. Auden was saying about the tools of art helping you to lead you toward the statement in the art. And I'll tell you about that. I started out, I have a mirror about this size and in that placement in the studio. And it's so that I can look at paintings that I'm working on and see them backwards, which is very helpful at times to just look at them more abstractly and from a different point of view. And I was making a drawing, a self-portrait drawing in the mirror and on a piece of paper, and I got including about this much of the surroundings. And then that led me to think that maybe I should then start looking at more of the surroundings. So I started just adding paper to that to make the drawing more inclusive. And I started drawing just things as I came to them in the studio. So I finally wound up with a drawing that included all of this in it. Then I thought, well, now that might make an interesting painting. It has a tremendous amount of detail in it, and I didn't really know how I would approach that in starting. But I decided that I would. So I laid out the canvas with a kind of arbitrary colored ground, and then made the drawing on the canvas from the drawing on the paper, and made it in white line on the background. And then gradually, as I was developing the painting, the white line got painted out, and there were many adjustments of color as I worked, and you'll see a little bit of that in the shots here. And finally, let's see, I started by this head was turned this way, and then in the final painting, of course, it's looking to the side, and some things have gotten eliminated and other things simplified. But A lot of it is very specific. This is a drawing that I own of Louis Bantz. This is a drawing of Bob Colescott, and then an early painting of mine, and then sculptures in various places of mine, and of course the all-important radio, which often, almost always has NPR on it. Yeah. One of the things I've done during the past year is to be a secretary recorder for my cat, who wrote his memoirs. And over about the last 6 months, it's called Buster's Memoir, and the gallery has it here for sale. And we've displayed the drawings that I made for the book. So I hope you'll come and see the exhibition, because paintings are really made to be seen in the flesh. And although the internet is great for preview, you really need to see paintings in person. Okay.